Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 365, and today's guest is John Harthorne, founder and managing director of Two Lanterns Venture Capital and founder and decade-long CEO of MassChallenge. A career is a body of work. It doesn't have to be a straight line. It can take twists and turns. You can switch industries, you can reinvent yourself, and it should be fulfilling. As you'll learn from John's background, he had lots of twists and turns, but ultimately, he decided there must be more to his career. One where you can make a massive impact, but he obviously had to weigh the risks of the unknown during one of the worst economic conditions back in 2009. Well, that unknown became one of the largest accelerators in the world, with MassChallenge having over 4,000 alumni and over $13 billion raised, with a 65% survival rate, which includes companies like Flywire, Ginger, Bitso, and many, many more. It's proof that you can think and dream big. Today at Two Lanterns Venture Capital, John is focused on making pre-seed and seed investments in software startups in the US and Israel. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like John's outlook for 2025 as an investor, his background, which includes all the twists and turns, including how he landed in the tech industry at a cybersecurity company called At Stake, the decision to go back to business school at MIT Sloan, and how his passion for entrepreneurship developed, the full life cycle story of MassChallenge, including all the stories from leaving Bain as a consultant along with Akil Nigam to start the accelerator, and all the obstacles they overcame to start it, and then scaling the organization, what led him down the path of starting Two Lanterns Venture Capital, plus all the details on the firm and what they are targeting for investments, common entrepreneurial mistakes, and so much more. All right, now a brief word from our podcast sponsor, Silicon Valley Bank. I'm excited to share that this podcast is brought to you by one of the strongest longtime supporters of the local startup ecosystem, that being Silicon Valley Bank, a division of First Citizens Bank. SVB serves innovative tech, healthcare, and life sciences companies, including 60% of CNBC's Disruptor 50 list, 72% of Forbes Cloud 100 list, and 48% of Forbes AI 50 list companies. With more than 1,500 bankers and relationship advisors and $42 billion in loans through Q2 2024, SVB delivers the right people, service, and resources to support your entire financial journey. Learn more at svb.com. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with John. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you because we've got a lot to cover here. MassChallenge is something that has been such a staple of the Boston tech scene, and obviously it grew to international proportions. So we're going to talk about that story as well as what you're up to as an investor. But I did want to kind of just talk about the current state of the market, especially in Boston. So the last 3 years have been challenging across the tech industry as a whole. Obviously, Boston's part of that. Now that we're in January, what's the crystal ball outlook as we head into 2025 here?
So I struggle at times to kind of separate what I think is genuine predictive capabilities and also my optimism. I'm a natural optimist. So I do believe this will be a significantly better year than we have seen over the past 2 or 3 years. Not fortunately, I think, not as frothy or exuberant as 2021, 2022, which is really what I think drove us into the periods of challenge over the last few years, is that we went just insane in 2021 and 2022. Literally, the venture market doubled in size, primarily because of these non-traditional investors, the hedge funds, and then sort of holding companies and other types of investors that mostly don't engage in venture, that have $100 billion funds that came in and then started investing in venture and doubled the size of the market, drove valuations through the roof, reduced the amount of time you had for diligence, et cetera. So really created a crazy environment of exuberance during this period of zero interest rate climate environment. That created a massive hangover that is only just now clearing the market. And it hasn't yet fully cleared. But I think 2025 will be a year where we return back to normal, or at least close to it. So I don't think we'll go back to 2021. Again, that's good because that was a problem. That was what created a problem. But I think we will see significantly better years than we saw in 2024, 2023, in the latter half of 2022. And I think, honestly, if you take 2021, first half of 2022 that were exuberant, and you add in the subsequent 2.5 years and you average them, they actually are pretty normal. It's just that we basically pre-spent the last 2.5 years during 2021 and 2022. And that kind of perverted the market. And it still has left, there is still a hangover out there. We have not seen the exits that we need to see that return money to LPs. That means they're hesitant to reinvest in new funds. New funds are still worried about the excessive valuations created, especially at the later stage funds, the excessive valuations created in their portfolio that is keeping them from raising new rounds or forcing them to raise flat rounds to just sort of keep them alive and kicking without having to take a hard down round. So a lot of that stuff is still in the market, and that will have some impacts. Like I would expect we'll see increased secondary purchases of shares, increased acquisitions, which is good. Some of those at a loss, or some of them at least at flat rounds relative a couple of years ago. I do think we'll see more IPOs. There's a lot of good unicorn companies, like 100 plus unicorn companies waiting in line for IPOs. This new administration, I think, is expected to be significantly more business friendly. They'll apply pressure for reduced interest rates. Interest rates are naturally coming down, I think, at least a little bit further. That will encourage more exits. Those companies have grown into their valuations, many of them that were exuberant at one point, but now are more reasonable. So that should all drive exits in the form of M&A and IPOs and secondaries. And that is really what the market needs. That will create money that flows back to LPs. And that should, in turn, create new investments in new funds and sort of a sigh of relief across the market that will generate essentially a return to normal. And that's, so I'm optimistic. I think we'll still see a little bit of spluttering. Markets tend to do a drunken walk, go too far in one direction and then compensate and go too far in the other. And so I'm not sure we'll see exact normalcy, but I think we'll get pretty close to normal by the end of the year, with some fits and starts here and there. But on the whole, this should be a good year.
I'm an optimist too, so I'm going to double down on everything you said. I totally agree. I think we'll get back to normal. And one of the things that kind of drives me a little bit crazy is how sometimes the media compares things to those frothy years. Like, oh, it's down. It's like, you can't compare it.
It's not. I mean, those were literally like double the next closest. I mean, like way off the charts. They were, not black swan, but they were, just extremely abnormal. So it's not a fair comparison. Now, I am worried that, those non-traditional investors could return. The markets there's an instability in the market, I think, that feels weird. And I'm not sure that's why I'm somewhat cautious. But all said and done, I think most of the indicators are pointing in the right direction. And I think we should see a very good year. I'm super optimistic for my portfolio. And I think the early stage of the market, seed funds, even Series A, but especially seed funds, we weren't as badly impacted. So for the most part, we're just waiting for the noise to clear in the later parts of the pipeline so that our companies can sort of raise their rounds upon a normal schedule. But my startups have excellent revenue. Their valuations were never really that high. So it's just a matter that the rest of the pipeline was a little bit stalled, panicky, and freaking out because they had been disrupted by these periods of exuberance. So I'm ecstatic to return to normal. I think I'll start to see portfolio valuations, increasingly up and to the right, which is great.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
All right, let's rewind the clock. So where'd you grow up? What were you like as a child?
So I grew up in the Boston area. I grew up in Wayland, Mass. So upper middle class, great town. Loved it. I had, the relatively large plots of land. You'd ride your bike to friends' houses. I had multiple friends right on my street, and then others all roughly in biking distance, or you'd hop off the bus at somebody else's location. And you could like climb trees. You could, wander through the woods, super safe neighborhoods, play baseball, softball in the street, whatever, basketball at everybody's house. So very good upbringing. Like I mean, really blessed. So that was great. I grew up in Wayland. I ended up going to high school at Deerfield Academy, a boarding school in Western Mass. And I think I'm one of the rare kids that I wanted to. There's nothing wrong with my family. My family's adoring and lovely. My parents are still together. I see them all the time. We're very close. So I didn't have a challenge at home. But my parents, especially my mother, was immigrant, German immigrant, relatively strict, not in a bad way, but just like wanted me to make my bed. I had chores. I had to structure and schedule. And I've always been a bit ADD and kind of, all over the place. And I didn't love that structure. And I had visited a friend of mine from Wayland High. His brother was going to Exeter, Phillips Academy Exeter. And we visited him for like a sporting event to watch it. And I was like, oh my God, you get your own room in a dorm and you can do whatever you want. You don't have to make your bed. And you have like
This is high school?
fields. Yeah. And it's like famously good education. And and there's like princes and princesses in your class. And this is amazing. I want that too. So I was like, I want to go to private school. My parents were like, what an enterprising young man. That's great. Let's do that. So I ended up applying to a bunch of schools, got into Deerfield. It was probably the school I liked the most from my tour. So I was ecstatic about that. And I had a very good experience, excellent academics, met a lot of great people. And I got to sort of become an even more independent, soul. That I think was really important, has been really important in shaping the way I see the world. And that, you live on a corridor with 16, at the time I arrived, it was all male, and it went co-ed while I was there. So 16 boys on one corridor, and then, sometimes 2 or 3 floors. So you've got, when the teacher, shuts their door, it's a little bit of Lord of the Flies and all the boys come up, but you really learn a lot about human psyche and a lot about other people. And you really have to develop your own personality in a way that I don't think you get in a home environment with just your sort of core family. It has its pluses and minuses, but on the whole, it was good for me. And then I went to Bowdoin College. I think the independence did get me in a little bit of trouble. I was a little bit of a delinquent at times, especially towards the end of my career. I managed to kind of pull myself back together, but I did get in a little bit of trouble. And enterprising, literally entrepreneurship related stuff, but maybe not all above board. That did hold me back a little bit. I was smart and did well on my tests and everything. Bowdoin's a great school. So I got into Bowdoin. I was excited about that. I went up to Bowdoin College in Maine, majored in German literature. My mother's German, so I had that German language background. That made it, a lot of what I did, I kind of fell into. Like people say, you should follow your heart. And I really did in a lot of ways. Like I wasn't a planner. I wasn't like, what am I going to do in 15 years and therefore work my way backwards? What classes do I have to take? How do I excel? I kind of just was like, oh, I like this class. This is interesting. This is fun. In some cases, this is easy and I'm really good at it. So I might as well do that. And then I'll play on the side with stuff that's more difficult. But so I mean, in hindsight, it was good and bad for me, but it really did teach me a whole bunch of skills that, again, in hindsight, have turned out to be super valuable. But you would never say, if you want to be an entrepreneur, go be a German lit major and minor in chemistry. Like none of what I did made sense. It does in hindsight, but it didn't if you were planning my current life from the get-go. I kind of fell into a lot of stuff accidentally because I just accepted things as they came. But like German literature, I learned how to tell a story. I learned how different, and now I review pitches for a living, and at MassChallenge, I had to raise a lot of money and I had to tell our story about why I believe in Massachusetts and why we're poised to win. And a lot of it I can trace back to just good storytelling, good writing, literary analysis, understanding weaknesses in characters and strengths in characters and how they can fit together and how you can build a team. A lot of that comes from those times. And then a diverse set of skills, doing German literature. I majored in German literature. I minored in chemistry. Then after school, I was a swimmer. I was a varsity swimmer. I was the worst on the team.
Saw that. NESCAC varsity swimmer.
Yeah. I was the second worst on the team.
One of my favorite fun facts about Bowdoin is one of the greatest tech entrepreneurs of all time is an alum.
Yeah. Reed Hastings, or are you talking about me? I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Both. I meant both.
No, there's a lot of great, it's actually like quite a good number of a bunch of the HubSpot founders. There's a lot in the Boston community that you'd be surprised. Andy Palmer is a Bowdoin grad. So there's quite a few out there, and I was pleased to see that. It's a small alumni pool, so you don't see the volume that you get from sort of MIT and Harvard, obviously. But there are quite a few really good entrepreneurs that came through Bowdoin.
Very cool. Well, let's talk about how you got your career started.
Yeah, so let's see. I graduated Bowdoin. It's a humanities school. I was German lit major. I went, I did it. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like literally at graduation, people had jobs. And I was like, when did you get a job? I don't remember. When was that? When did that happen? Like, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. I was never told. I didn't see that memo. So I just wasn't prepared as graduation arrived. And I was like, oh crap, what am I going to do? I can't just be homeless. But I know as long as I'm studying, my parents will continue to support me. They won't disown me. So I applied for a master's degree in Europe. And honestly, part of my thinking was, oh, I'll go to Europe and party for 2 years and have fun. And then I'll figure out my life plan there. So I did a master's degree in partially in England and mostly in Berlin, Germany. And that was a year-long master's degree in European politics. So German lit, chemistry, European politics. You can see there's not really a clear planned pattern here. And then I stuck around in Berlin and I was just translating German to English. I did journalism. I wrote in like an English language newspaper there. I just did whatever odd jobs. Honestly, did construction stuff, and I get paid cash, go out and party at night, then wake up hungover, go find a job for the day, get paid cash, go out, and I just repeat for another year after my master's. And then finally, at some point, I was like, crap, I gotta kind of get my life together. I'm like, I'm gonna end up, dead in a gutter sometime, or like I'm not. Or I'm gonna wake up 40 years old and be like, I have no chance left. It's all over. I wasted my life and there's nothing left. So I finally like broke out of my complacence and figured I gotta get a plan together. So I started to read up on careers, and honestly, like I didn't know anything about business. Like if you had asked me at that point, like what is marketing? I'd be like, I don't even know. It's some kind of, I guess you're talking about the business. I don't even know. Is it advertising? Like I was very in the dark because all I had done was just humanities, and I kind of thought maybe I would be a diplomat with my German language. So came back, moved to New York City, as many recent grads do, and I got an internship at the UN, and I figured I'll sort of like find a career into diplomacy. Maybe I'll go back to school. But the more I learned about diplomacy, and I was thinking like, oh, they'll make me an ambassador, and that'll be great. It'd be great to be an ambassador. I would love to be ambassador to Germany. Wonderful. But then like as you investigate that career path, you realize, whoa, there's like 40 years of struggle and suffering, climbing your way up and paper pushing and bureaucracy and following orders, and typically getting stationed in like a lot of terrible places around the world before you get stationed in somewhere that you want to be. And so as I looked at that, I was like, oh, I'm actually terrible at following instructions. I'm super ADD. I do not like having a boss. I like to design my own path. I'm not going to survive that. And then what I was told is the other way to get to become an ambassador is to go and become a super wealthy business person, donate a ton of money, and then you can get appointed above all of those people, those career people. And I was like, that's probably, I'd rather be that guy. So I decided, all right, then I got to go to business school. Because I don't even understand what business means. Like I don't even know the definitions of it. I know nothing about it, never taken econ, like literally zero business background. So I started to look into what it takes to get into top business schools. I decided, all right, I got to switch. And I was translating German to English to make money still. But then I was like, I got to go to a formal program. I came back to Boston. I ran a translation department for a company. So now I was a manager. I had a couple people working with me. I got exposed to software that was helping to optimize some of that translation at the time. Not AI or anything like that. It was very simple, but it was kind of memorizing past sentences. In automobile repair manuals, there's a lot of repeat sentences. Check wiring diagram, right? That kind of stuff. So it would just automate and repeat anything that was known. And then it would give you fuzzy matches for like most of the sentences known, but not this one word is different. So then I started to optimize that software, took some classes in software development, website development. That was around like 1999, 2000. So now we're talking about like that first big wave and internet bubble. And so I was like, oh, everybody's making money in the internet, and I'm kind of a closet computer geek. So I started to do more of that stuff. Again, just kind of falling my way into a career, not really planning it. I'm sort of now pointing my way towards business. Like at least I was like, all right, I think I got to do something business oriented, and I have to go to business school. So then on the way back, I did a trip to Germany with our CEO for the translation company. to sort of pitch our translation services to Porsche and BMW. We were doing all of Volkswagen, Audi. But we wanted to expand beyond that. So we did these sales trips together. And I was the better German speaker. He spoke a little bit, but I was the primary. So I was like the sales face and German guy. And on the way back, he was up in business class and I was in coach. And I sat next to somebody who worked at a startup in Kendall Square. And she was super funny. We cracked each other up the whole way. I liked her. This woman named Window Snyder. She's pretty well known in cybersecurity. Really friendly, fun woman. And she worked at a company called At Stake that was a Battery Ventures backed company. The Loft Group was part of that, had been roped into that. And I thought it was fascinating. And I was like, that sounds so cool. And everybody's winning in the internet world. So I should switch and do an internet startup. So I gave her a card. She was like, dude, we're tripling in size every year. We're hiring warm bodies. So like, give me your card. Literally, that was like maybe a Friday, interview on Tuesday, job offer on the next Thursday. It was the days of like heady opulence. And I was like, oh my God. And I was making 3 times my salary. So I got there. I knew so little about cybersecurity, the cybersecurity company. In the interview, they were like, so just tell me what, like if you had to protect a web server on the net, what are some things you might think about doing? And I was like, I don't know, I guess like maybe antivirus or something. And they were like, okay, not really in a certain, okay, maybe. All right, I see where you're going with that. All right. And they kept searching for it. And I just really didn't know. I was like, I heard something. I read a little bit about like a sacrificial lamb or some kind of a DMZ. I'm not really, I don't, and they were like, okay, good. You're working around. It's fine. And then literally the interviewer just leans in and goes, can you just say the word firewall? Just say firewall out loud. And I was like, oh, of course I put a firewall. He goes, great. Okay. You could, we're going to send you a job offer tomorrow. And that was it. So they gave me a book, TCP/IP protocol, and a bunch of other stuff to read. They taught me. I learned from some of the best in the business. And I ended up doing, consulting for eBay, and a lot of other Microsoft major clients. And I ended up running the training department and did training with the NSA, Fidelity, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, I got to fly around the world, like 200,000 miles in a couple of years. It was an amazing experience for me. And that's really where I fell in love with startups. And that kind of like, that was when I was like, all right, now I think I know what I want to do. And then they got bought by Symantec. I don't think anybody made money. It wasn't a big success, but I loved it. Still, like some of my favorite people that worked there, Christina Luconi was there, Mike Lorette, whom I later worked with at MassChallenge. Lots of just great people.
I think as I was preparing for this interview, I didn't know that about you. And I was like, he was at Stake? That's amazing. So yeah, Christina Luconi, she's been a mentor and an amazing like help for my career. She was the first guest on my podcast when I was experimenting. I was like, would you mind doing this? And she did.
Awesome.
And yeah, she's amazing.
She was like our chief people person. And I remember I remember when she was like, well, I'm the chief people person. I was like, that's a title? You can't be a chief. That's not a title. You're supposed to be like head of HR or something. But like, that's when I was like, oh, you get to make up the rules at a startup. This is awesome. That's when I fell in love.
Chris Wysopal,
awesome,
he was on the podcast and we talked about the whole Loft Group and testifying in front of Congress and all of the crazy things that they did.
Anyway, I learned a lot from that experience. That was like amazing experience. I think people were really genuine, sincere, working really hard to do the right thing. Great people. But I ended up in the middle of that. I got married while I was there to a Russian woman. And then at some point after we got bought by Symantec, I got bored. It was like, it became corporate, lost a lot of its startup flair. A lot of the great people left. Some of them were still there, but like we were part of a P&L and it was like it's just like I ceased to be that exciting. So, my wife was a little bit homesick. And I was like, you know what? Screw this. Let's just quit. I'm going to quit. We owned a house in Somerville, a triple decker. I was like, we can rent the whole thing out and we'll make money. We'll be earning $1,000 a month or $1,500 even, which is more than enough to live in Russia. Let's go back and we'll live for a year in Russia. And from there, I'll write my business school applications and it'll be so much more interesting to have Russia as a backdrop, and I'll be learning so much more, and I'll have time to work on them, and I can learn Russian, meet your family, and travel around. I did a bunch of, not a bunch, I did some volunteer work. I did Habitat for Humanity. And like, super funny anecdote, I got there, and At Stake, now Symantec, called me, and they were like, holy crap, we're losing a ton of clients. Like, you had like a several $1,000,000 of training work, and they're all backing out because you're not doing the training, and we hired newbies that don't know what they're doing, and so like, you got to come back. And I was like, no, I made a promise to my wife. It's a family thing. I can't. I'm not coming back. I'm done. And they were like, come on, we really need you, please, please, please. And I was like, I can't do it. It's not going to happen. Sorry. And they were like, look, we'll pay you double your salary to come back for a month and a half. And I was like, no, I've got values, man. I made a promise, and they were like, look, we'll do 3 times your salary. And I was like, come on, who do you think I am? So they were like, all right, 4 times your salary for a month and a half. And I was like, all right, I'm on the next flight. I'll be there. They came back, and in like a month and a half, I made, I don't know, 40, almost 50 grand. So, which was a huge amount of money for me at that time. I mean, it's a lot of money anyway, but at that time in particular, it was enormous. And so then I called my wife, and after the end of it, I was like, meet me in Helsinki. Let's do a tour of Europe for 30 days, and we'll do not all like 5-star stuff. Nothing low cost. We're going to blow 40 grand in 4 weeks. And we just like tore up Europe, and it was awesome. And, we didn't have kids, so I'm so glad we did it. Then we went back and lived in Russia for the remainder of it. And that's where my business school apps ended up getting into MIT Sloan, which was like absolutely one of my top choices. At this point, I felt like I was in love with startups, and I felt like that was my future, right? That's what I wanted to do. And MIT is amazing at startups. So that was like primary reason. But then I also was like, maybe I could just go into like strategy consulting, go to Bain, McKinsey, BCG, something like that, and then go and do that for a few years, and then become a CEO of a big company, make a huge salary and have a nice fat house in the suburbs, and then retire early. That's another option that might be okay. So I couldn't decide, and MIT is great at both. So I went there, and that's where like I feel like there was a serious change in the trajectory of my life. Like, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, was going to MIT. And I mean, the fact that I got in is amazing, because I was, like I said, I was kind of a slacker. I didn't really, like, you think of my application at this point, I'm like, all right, German lit major, minored in chemistry, got a master's degree in political science in Berlin, then went to New York, worked at the UN, translated German automobile repair manuals to English for a few years, then did computer security consulting, and then ran a training department for computer security, then just quit and moved to Russia for a year and lived in Russia and volunteered. Like, what the hell is wrong with me? There's no plan. It is just wayward. So, but I think writing the applications, I realized, like, because you have to make sense out of it. And I realized there is a sense, and I was kind of following my heart and doing it blindly. It wasn't planned. But what I realized about myself is I really love learning. Like, so I get bored quickly. Once I figure out how something works, I don't want to do it anymore. It's like, all right, that's ordinary now. Now you can have a computer programmer, a monkey can do it. I don't need to, I know how it works. It's understood. So I like to switch topics, right? I don't like to stay in one lane for too long because it gets boring. So that's because I just love learning all the time. I want to be doing different stuff, challenging things all the time, big complex problems. And then I was happiest in my life when I felt like I was having an impact of some kind. The reason I love That Stake is it felt like a small community. We're all contributing. We're like, I could land a client and it would be a big deal. People would care, and there would be high fives, and like it meant something. Whereas at Symantec, it was like where I'm a cog in some big machine. I never even met my boss in person. Just had phone calls like across the country. I don't even know what they look like. Right. So, and I just felt like, this doesn't matter. I'm not impacting anybody really. And so I needed to feel like I was having, I'm having an impact. And then if I really thought about it, I was at my happiest when I felt I was empowering other people. And this, I mostly got outside of work, but, like I helped a inner city kid at camp learn how to swim. He was desperately afraid of the lake water, and it took me the whole summer to really get him into the lake. And then at the end of the year, he swam across the 25-yard lane, and his parents were there and they were crying and hugging, and it was like and if I think it was like one of the best things I ever did. And it's like, he went on to be the captain of the Dartmouth swim team, so it's not totally insignificant, but like in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really matter. I didn't like save 1,000 children's lives or anything, but like I felt like I genuinely helped that person. Like they really fell in love with themselves and something about themselves. That is important to me. And these three things would ultimately culminate at MassChallenge, is what I think made it possible for me to really contribute, is it contributed all of those three things. But I figured this out in applying to business school. That woke me out of my complacency. I think I was like I grew up in an upper middle class, wealthy town. I never really, like, my downside risk was small. There was never a point in my life where I was like, I'm going to be hungry, or there's a risk I might be poor and really struggle. Like, my worst case scenario was always like, okay, I might have a job I don't like. That's going to basically the worst of it. So I think I was complacent for a very long time. And then applying to school, business school, and then getting accepted at MIT, an institution I adore and admire so much, and then going there and being around amazing people, it like broke the complacency. And like one of my favorite anecdotes from the early days at MIT, I went to, so I wanted to meet the engineering side of campus. The business school side is awesome, and I have a lot of great friends, amazing people. But I was like, MIT is famous for its engineers, so I want to meet that side of campus too. So there was like a flyer up for a mixer on the engineering side of campus. So I went, and I was like, I just went by myself. And it was the worst part. Like, we have awesome parties on the business school campus. We're amazing. Like, we rocked all the time. And it was like, and you'd stay up super late and then still get to class exhausted, whatever. But it was fun. But this was like maybe 10 people in the room. It was like, gymnasium size room. There was one table with a vinyl cloth on it and apple juice, like a little boombox on the ground playing music. People just sort of standing, almost rocking and looking at the floor, not even talking. I was like, what the hell? So I went up and I was like, hi, hey, I'm John. I talked to them and I was like, what do you do? And went around, and they just like blew my mind. These are undergrads, most of them. And it was like, so what do you do? And he's like, I developed a system to address the largest mass poisoning in the history of humanity. We're using rusty nails and plastic buckets to remove arsenic from drinking water in Bangladesh. The UN dug wells all over Bangladesh, taught people to use the wells, and then turns out there's arsenic. The groundwater is poisoned with arsenic very badly, and that will make you go blind and kill you over time, right? So they developed a system that costs less than $3 to produce each unit. The arsenic adheres to the rust in the nails, and then you can have a little faucet on the bottom. You just pour it in the top, holes in the inside bucket, rusty nails in between, and then a spigot on the bottom. And then, so that already is amazing, right? But then they also developed a system for entrepreneurs to train people to be entrepreneurs and sell these things door to door and make money. So they created thousands of jobs for people to go and distribute this. And I'm like, and you're 20? Like, oh my God, I was a drunk. I was like I was useless at 20. It blew my mind. And I was like, I didn't think that was possible for like countries to address this, or for corporations. But you're just a 20-year-old in college and you're addressing, that's like, I didn't know we were allowed to be amazing. Like, I didn't think I thought you just had to kind of follow the path that was in front of you. And it was like, hey, I'm lucky, I got a pretty good path. That's great. Yay. But it's kind of boring. So then, I was like, that's incredible. Next kid developed airborne wind turbine that that produces energy 60% more efficiently than turbines on the ground. And it was currently in use in Afghanistan, helping our troops at the time, so they didn't have to bring gas through the mountains that was susceptible to attack and was causing deaths and stuff, and could be used anywhere. There's another one with solar thermal energy generator for sub-Saharan Africa for villages off the grid that would enable kids to read and learn at night after doing work in the fields, and so they could break the cycle of poverty. And another one working on a treatment for the leading cause of blindness that was going to prevent 40,000 children from going blind in the next few years. And then they were like, so what do you do? And I was like, oh, I thought maybe I would I might be a consultant. Um, and I like literally felt shame. I was like, I didn't know, but I didn't know I was allowed to do that stuff. I didn't think, and knowing that like, all right, I'm not an engineer, so I can't do the biopharma research to develop this leading, treatment for the leading cause of blindness. But like, I was like, I have skills that you don't have. I could work with you and we could do amazing things together. And that like opened my eyes. That was like a step function change in my perspective of reality and what was possible in my life. And that I will never forget. And I will always credit MIT as being like the greatest institution or organization with which I've ever been affiliated. That really set the spark for me. And then, it led to many subsequent um, uh, developments. I think you asked like a simple question, and I started to tell every part of the story. But I think it's the details are there, so it should be interesting. Hopefully,
So at MIT, like you eventually did join Bain as a consultant.
yeah. So I went there for my summer, like because I thought that was I was still undecided. Arriving, am I going to go to consulting and be a CEO of a big company, or should I do a startup? And I figure I'll do both at school, and then I'll figure out which one I like. So on the startup front, I entered and won the MIT 100K business plan competition. And on the consulting side, I won a business case competition, and then went to Bain and Company for my summer, which is a blast. Anybody at business school, if you have the opportunity to do a consulting job for the summer, it's the greatest job ever because they're just selling you, and they give you tickets to the Celtics, and I mean like you just get to go to amazing you whitewater rafting, and they wine and dine you all the time. It's great. It's not at all like consulting. I think I built one slide the entire summer, or like I did like very little real work, and I thought it was good work. But then you get back after it, and they're like, no, you have no idea. It's a grind, and you're going to be working really hard. So yeah, so I did end up going to Bain after. I fell in love with startups. We won the 100K, but it was a medical device company, and I can't, realistically, nobody's going to let me. No VC is going to let me run a medical device company. I don't have any background in it. Never been through the FDA approval process. The other two people on the team were PhD students that had a much longer time frame. They weren't in a rush. So it just wasn't a viable business for me to go after. So, and then I also had, $150,000 worth of student loans. So I didn't have an idea handy that I could immediately launch, and I had a lot of debt. So, and as much as I did have a pretty privileged background, I don't have like a big trust fund or anything. It's all my debt. I got to pay it off. So I was like, I got to go get a real job and pay down my loans before I can take a risk on a startup. So I went, and Bain's a great salary, great brand. I learned a lot. I loved my summer. It is a grind. It's a great company. They really draw off of the top echelon of the top schools. Really incredible. And I learned a great methodology for how to solve business problems and how to communicate effectively with clients, et cetera. So very helpful, but not the most enjoyable job. It really is a grind. And I knew pretty early on, like, I am not a consultant forever. This is not a good fit for my personality. Like I said, I don't follow instructions very well. Like I don't even follow my own instructions well. If I set myself a set of tasks, I'll redo it I just tend to like to reinvent things as I go. And consulting really is a methodology, and you're filling out the same slide deck over and over again with a different set of numbers and a different set of logos. But it's a lot of repeat work, and I just wasn't in love with it. So I knew I had to leave. My plan was to go through the first big bonus and then pay down my debt and leave. I graduated business school 2007. First big bonus is December 2008. You will recall is like the worst moment economically in living memory. Banks are collapsing. The Dow is dropping, 1,000 points a day over months. Like it was just nosedive. It had been around like 13,500 when I graduated, and it was at like, I think it hit into the 6,000. It was below 9,000 anyway by the end of the year. I think it went down to 6,000 early in 2009. So it was a dark, dark time. Talk of the next Great Depression, 10 years of loss and stagnation maybe. It was like hard. So hard to leave a high-paying job. I didn't like the job, but I wasn't bad at it. So I struggled with that, but I was like, I think it's going to kill me. Like I felt like physically ill.
I hope you are enjoying this interview. Just a brief word from our sponsor. As a longtime champion in the local startup ecosystem, Silicon Valley Bank supports innovative companies with the solutions and financing they need through every stage of growth. With more than 1,500 bankers and relationship advisors and $42 billion in loans through Q2 2024, SVB delivers the right people, service, and resources to support your entire financial journey. Learn more at svb.com.
I just wasn't happy. I was stressed. I had a son at this point. He was born during business school, but I felt like I wasn't a good parent. I wasn't a good husband. I was stressed all the time. It just was like, I was not happy. So I decided I got to get out of this. I got to do a startup. I'm good at startups. I can figure it out. I'll brainstorm. I brainstormed like mad. And I mostly like consumer electronics ideas, things that were like impossible for me to do. I'm not an engineer. I don't know how to do any of that. It was just like, I like gadgets. I'll do a gadget company. I'll be the next Steve Jobs. I'll be the next Bill Gates. Just like in my mind, I had this idea of like where I wanted to be. I want to be a billionaire, successful software or technology entrepreneur, but I didn't think at all about the path. Like, what do I have to do? What's step one? What's step two? What's step three? And so I just had, but I couldn't figure it out. You can't do that. It doesn't work. So I crumpled up all my ideas, threw them out. I'm lying in bed like mid-December thinking this sucks. Like I'm angry at Wall Street. I'm angry at the world. I'm like, I don't want to be a consultant. And thinking, we need startups more than ever right now. We need jobs. We need wealth creation. We need hope and optimism, problem solving, a way to engage our young people and excite them again. So we need startups. And yet it's so hard to launch one in this climate. Somebody's got to fix that. Right? I don't know, the Fed, the president, the Congress, somebody's going to have to do something. Wall Street, I don't know who it is. So, and then I kind of half fell asleep and then woke up with this adrenaline shot to the heart, like feeling like epiphany realization, like in Pulp Fiction when they jab her with the adrenaline, like wide awake and realizing like, wait, I'm somebody. Why don't I fix that? That will be my startup. And then like really MassChallenge as an idea, like 80% of it anyway, more or less just materialized in my head. It was different in that the original idea was for profit and had a $50 million fund associated with it. Just logically, I'm a business school guy and a Bain, so like any business is naturally for profit. It wasn't thoughtful or intentional. It was just like, that's the default. So that was the idea. And then I went to Bain. I pitched it to my colleague Akil Nigam, who sat next to me, and he, HBS guy, and then my co-founder eventually. And he was also very unhappy at Bain and wanted to leave immediately. He was ready to pack up and go that day. And I had to be like, whoa, let's think about it a little bit. So then we pitched it to a bunch of other folks and people liked the idea. Some of it was dumb and they would tell us that part's stupid, fix this part, whatever. And basically the community in Massachusetts refined the idea from maybe it was like 65% there. And they got us to like 95% there. Just through interviewing and talking with people and pitching the idea and them telling us that part's stupid, you'll never get money from them. This is who you could get money from. What do you think about this? You'll never get 50 million, maybe start with just prize money. And it started to refine and then it became a nonprofit and we just kind of rolled from there. And then it like took off and had legs of its own because I really felt at that time like this is the thing that is amazing. This is what I can do that is the equivalent of addressing the largest mass poisoning in history because I can catalyze a renaissance. Like we could revitalize, starting with Massachusetts, but really the whole country and the whole world. We can restore economic growth by empowering the creative class and the entrepreneurs who create all of the value and take all of the risk and yet have to wait in line to talk to investors when they're the ones we should be waiting in line to talk to. They're the idea makers and they take all of the struggle and torment is on their shoulders. Let's empower them. We're going to flip the whole equation on its head. And it was like the thing that you can't not do. Like once you have the idea, I couldn't just go back to Bain. I like hated myself every second I was not doing it. I'm like, we got to do this like right now. We got to go fix the world. And that became, MassChallenge with a lot of trials and tribulations in between, but.
Well, so I remember it clear as day. So same, 2008, 2009, I was running a recruiting firm. Financial crisis hits. I start VentureFizz as this side project because I had no search fees to be had. So running it, VentureFizz starts to get a little bit of momentum, and I distinctly remember, I think I went to a coffee shop, saw Akil speak about MassChallenge. And I'm usually an optimist, as we stated earlier in this discussion.
Yeah.
And he was promoting grassroots MassChallenge. We're going to get 100 plus startups, and it's going to be this amazing competition. I was just sitting there being like, what? Do you know what this financial crisis is? Are you guys insane? I was such a, this will never work.
Yeah.
So I have that confession that I had to make to you.
No, there's a lot. Like, I mean, and frankly, like, especially our initial pitch was legitimately crazy. And this, I think, is important for most entrepreneurs to recognize. The only thing you know with certainty about an early stage business plan is that it's wrong. That is like with certainty. That you're never going to get it right on the first attempt. It's not possible. When you design, the first airplane design is not a 747. You're barely figuring out how lift works and how, like, what materials and other, and like just the basic structure of it. So it's okay. It's normal that it's going to be crazy. And people are going to tell you no nonstop for the first year because they're right. Because it won't work like that. It's dumb. You're wrong in so many ways. And we had this idea, we'd raise a $50 million fund. I don't remember who it was. I wish I did, but we had an early meeting with like a paralegal, I think, at a law firm, like somebody who wasn't even like a deal maker or anybody of like grand significance in the ecosystem. And we pitched, we're going to get a $50 million fund. We're going to challenge the world to bring out the ideas. The winners are going to get Series A investment out of our fund, and then we're going to sell that investment at the next round of financing to cash out and make money. And that was the pitch. They're like, oh, okay. So how many funds have you guys run before? We're like, oh,
None.
no. No, we haven't run a fund before. No. They're like, oh, okay. So you're just big angel investors? You've done a lot of angel investors? We're like, no, actually, no, never. No, zero, no angel investing at all. It's like, so you've never made any? Are you a big fundraiser? Are you like billionaire's kid, or you have access to like tons of money, or where are you going to get the? How are you going to raise the 50 million? We're like, I don't know. We just thought like maybe the government, and they're like, government, okay, that's a big entity. You got a department or something? You have like an angle on it? We're like, probably we're thinking the federal, I think, probably. Like, I don't really know. Like, we just had nothing worked out. We thought the president would just march into the president and get money. And they were like, okay, how long do you think this is going to take you to raise the 50 million? And we literally were like, probably 3 months. 3 months? Like, they were like, well, dude, I admire your balls, but no way. No effing way. Get out. Sorry. But like, good luck. And we were but we really thought we could do it. And then we just didn't go away. We just kept refining. I think as an entrepreneur, you need that level of like unrefined optimism and sort of a crazy commitment to this idea that really is probably crazy. But then I think where we did well, that we were smart, is that we did listen to the market, and we did hear, like, that was embarrassing. And after we were like, all right, that pitch doesn't work. We're wrong. Some of the stuff, she was correct. We're off. We got to fix. We can't do this again. That was embarrassing. Like, how do we refine this? And then what we figured out was we were like, well, let's just ask them. So we would start pitching. People would say, the federal government's really hard to work with. You're never going to get that money. It takes forever might take you 9 months. You're going to have to fill out these forms. It's all siloed by industry, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, all right, where would you go? Where do you think we could get the money? And they were like, oh, well, probably you could get it from the state. I mean, the state's a lot easier. You could probably reach the governor. And I think the Secretary of Economic Development has most of the budget. He's accessible. You could probably like find his email pretty quickly. And so we were like taking note. And that's how literally like the people that we met with in Massachusetts like designed MassChallenge, because they fixed all of the problems in the model that we had, and then we refined it with all of it. And then at some point people stopped saying it was a bad idea and started saying, oh, this is awesome. How do I get involved? Can I sign up as a mentor? I have a startup I want to refer to you. How do I donate money? How do I, like, it was amazing. It just started to, and then we're like, I think we've hit our product market fit. And then, it took off.
Well, you went on to get an amazing roster of people that were backing this, like Desh Deshpande, Joe Fallon, Mayor Menino, which, I give so much credit to Mayor Menino for the innovation district and really getting the ecosystem humming.
He was amazing. And we really got to see very different leadership styles. Like Desh Deshpande was the first person to really help us, but advice, not money right away. He was quick with money later, but it was all advice. And then Deval Patrick was the first to give us money. It was primarily via Secretary for Economic Development, Greg Bielecki, who passed away recently, is an amazing guy, did so much for the community. So he took the biggest risk, and then that catalyzed money from Desh, that catalyzed money from the Kauffman Foundation, and the governor catalyzed money from Microsoft, and then it kind of congealed. So they were the first real, but very different leadership style. The governor, more conservative, more thoughtful and careful. They did take a risk on us, obviously, but it's a democratic, you have to follow the rules, everything. So, couldn't give us advice on how to fundraise, but would invite us to events and seat us at a table with people that had money and could be good targets. So, would drop hints, but couldn't like explicitly tell us or make things happen. So they never would like twist an arm and say, you got to give them money. Whereas Mayor Menino ran the city much more like a mafia don. He was willing to say like, you're going to give them money. And now, to be fair, I wasn't privy to all this. I didn't see it. It was all behind the doors. So, but it just the way things, we would have a meeting, indicate this is what we need. Then I would get a phone call an hour later being like, hey, you don't know me, but I want to offer you this thing that I think you might need. And you're like, who the hell are you? So you could just get that like they were making stuff happen. And so Joe Fallon, visionary, amazing. He took great care of us. He was close friends with Mayor Menino. I think they were close. They both wanted that environment, that area to succeed. And I'm sure there was some favor swapping, although I don't know. And Joe was super good to us, took big risks on us. We were not really his cup of tea. He's like he probably wears $10,000 suits and watches and stuff. And here we are, these scrappy startups that have, idea paint all over the walls, covered in graffiti and crazy stuff, and people bringing motorcycles into the office and I think we drove him almost insane. He was like, what are you doing? This is a Class A office building. You can't behave like this. We have like marble floors and chandeliers. What are you, but he was patient with us, and he gave us a lot of free support, really amazing. And Boston really stepped up for us. Amazing people. The ecosystem, when we started pitching, almost everybody said, A, you're crazy and it's not going to work, which was fair. But then B, what they said that wasn't fair is they said, all right, once it started to make sense, they were like, all right, this could work, but it's not going to work here because people in Boston are not collaborative. You're going to have to go to New York or California. Those ecosystems work, but ours is broken. Everybody's leaving. Nobody's helpful. That's the problem. They're all like selfish. I'll help you. I'll give you a couple of intros and I'll see what I can do. But I'm just telling you it's going to fail because the other people are not kind and generous. But every meeting I would have, they would say, I'll help you, but nobody else is going to help you. And I was like, this is my 30th meeting where you're going to help me and nobody else can help me. I feel like everybody's helping me. Nobody said no. Like, actually, I think you guys are mistaken that this isn't a collaborative environment. Everybody is collaborative. And people are amazing. What they've given us, money, office space, like introductions, advice, it was unbelievable. And we had like Ferraris with our logos on them. We had like wildest things that people would donate and give us we didn't get to keep the Ferraris, but I mean, for advertising purposes, people donated website development. People do like so much free stuff. And so Boston I learned really what an amazing and awesome ecosystem it is. And I think we tend to go through patterns, and I feel like I remain very bullish on this ecosystem. And a lot of it is we don't tell our story very well. Maybe we're a little bit too siloed and insular. We need to really get out and talk to each other more and be more optimistic and take more risks and just play harder as a community. But I remain very optimistic and bullish on Boston.
You obviously succeeded because you scaled this to while you were CEO, from what I read, 9 programs in 7 cities in 4 countries, 3,000 startups. Yep. Today, from their most recent impact report, 4,000 alumni. And what I thought was incredibly impressive was the diverse companies. Nearly 50% of the startups are led by female founders and over 50% by founders of color. Like, that's extraordinary.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that. And I think, and honestly, I think what's important is this, is there were no quotas. Like, we didn't achieve that by tweaking judging. Here's the thing that we figured out that was important that led to that. So 2 things. But one is you have to stuff the top of the funnel because female founders and minority founders don't necessarily feel immediately welcomed. So whether the ecosystem is unwelcoming or not, and there are many reasons to believe it isn't always welcoming, right? But even in a perfectly welcoming environment, if you're the only minority founder in the room, you feel awkward. It doesn't feel as welcoming, and it doesn't feel like your place. So the minority founders tend to aggregate in their own groups and then not mingle in with the broader majority ecosystem. And so you have to do specific outreach to say, no, this is a program for you. We are, like, you are desired here. We are for everyone, and you are welcome, and we want you to be here. You're not an outlier. And so that took some time just to build that outreach. And you kind of got to like stuff the top of the funnel to make sure you're getting a proper percentage of each representative sample of the ecosystem. Because by default, you'll just get white guys from Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, Tufts. Like that's the default. So we had to go out of our way to change our marketing and outreach. That's one important thing. Second thing was judging is biased. And it's a fascinating thing that a lot of it is just the established ecosystem. It's not intentional. It's not because people are cruel or mean or selfish, but it is just an identity psychology thing. So we found first year we had some panels that were all male, some judging panels that were all male, just because that, when you reach out to entrepreneurs, it's a skewed ecosystem. There aren't as many successful female entrepreneurs. And so you tend to have more male entrepreneurs, and then some of the panels end up without a female entrepreneur or judge. So we had a few that were all male. Those panels, if you brought in teams, 50% of the teams had a female founder, they would advance to the next round only 25% with female founders. So you would lose roughly half of the percentage of minority founders would get cut in half by a homogenous panel. If you add one female judge to that panel, you would get 50% out. And it's not because the female judge was judging them more friendly. In fact, there was, if anything, reason to believe they were more harsh than the male judges. But the male judges changed their votes, their voting behavior, because now the identity is heterogeneous. And so the identity psychology, now everybody is part of us. There's a natural us-them dynamic in judging anyway. And when you're all homogenous, it tends to align with that homogeneity. So anyway, so we figured that stuff out, and that's how we ended up with, we didn't have to nobody got a free slot. Like everybody earned their spot in MassChallenge, and I'm really proud of that. And we struggled, it still isn't perfect today, and it wasn't perfect then. And not everybody felt as welcomed or got as much support. We can continue to do better. But I think we've done very well on that metric, and I'm proud of that. I agree. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, two more statistics that I noticed. Over $13 billion in funding raised and a 65% survival rate. I saw that and I'm like, wow, that's extraordinary too. So many companies, can't really mention all of them, of course, but who were some of the more notable alumni that you think of?
Yeah, so there's a bunch there's some that have done very well, and there's some that I really adore, the founders, and some that are both. So I think among our notable success stories, as it were, you have Flywire, which was called Peer Transfer at the time.
Peer Transfer, yes, I remember. Yeah.
But now Flywire, which is done, obviously, that's a unicorn. Turo, which was Relay Rides at the time, that's a unicorn. Bitso, which is one that came through the Mexico program, that's the largest Spanish language crypto platform, I think, in the world, or it is one of the largest. I don't want to overstate it. It's very successful. They're doing great. And there's a bunch of others. Also, I think some that are coming up, that a lot of the biotech ones, there's a great strength, obviously, in Boston in healthcare and biotech, but some of those take a little bit longer. So I think one that has been phenomenal is Alkeus Pharmaceuticals. I sort of mentioned them earlier, and it was, to be honest, slightly dishonest context, but he's the founder out of MIT that is working on a treatment for the leading cause of blindness in the world, which is advanced macular degeneration. And it's essentially a modified form of vitamin D that you take as like a vitamin every day. It's a fascinating story, actually. So the body processes either vitamin D or A, and now I'm getting it screwed up, but incorrectly, and it will build up in your eyeball and damage your retina over time. And that's why I'm wearing reading glasses, because as we get older, everybody's retina will eventually get damaged by this process. And so he discovered this and then created a modified form of vitamin D, I believe, that doesn't have this consequence on your retina. And so if you take it in large enough numbers, you will crowd out the bad vitamin A in your eyes, and you will slow down the reaction that destroys your retina, so that instead of starting to go blind around age 40 or starting to lose your sight at around age 40, it will take until age 400. So then we never have to have reading glasses. And they're specifically going after an orphan drug. There's a rare disease in children where this happens already at like age 10. And it's not a large number. It's like 40,000 or so, I want to say, in the US, maybe 100,000. And so they're going after that. That gives you fast track FDA approval. So they are sort of getting through it all in an inexpensive pathway to what, their target audience ultimately is literally every single human being, right? It's every person on the planet.
Total addressable market, everybody.
Everybody. It's amazing, right? So I find that one to be really fascinating and amazing. And there's a lot like that where some I'm enamored by the technology is just very genius and interesting. They don't always work out. There was a fascinating Israeli had a technology. It was called Vikoi Therapeutics. And the idea was to fight viruses, which we don't have effective treatment for viruses. You can do vaccines, but we can't sort of cure it once it's in you. And his idea was, since they burrow into other cells, to create a nanoparticle that was like a jail cell that was particularly attractive to the virus. It would be sort of not magnetic, but sort of very attractive to the virus. But so then they would come and insert themselves into that, but they couldn't get out. It would trap them. And then you would remove these like little mini devices from the body to remove all of the virus, and it would allow your body. So fascinating idea, very complicated. I think FDA path is really difficult because these are considered devices that you're swallowing, billions, maybe trillions of them. So how do you guarantee you get them all out? So there's a lot, but it was like genius idea, like really clever. There's a lot of stuff like that where I was just like, wow, amazing people. And one of the sad things you realize is most startups don't, become massive successes. It's unfortunate. But they're all worth trying. And the founders, I think, have amazing experiences, and some of them become hugely successful. So it's a blast.
Yeah, it's those repeat founders where maybe the first one doesn't work out, the next one, they've learned so much that it does. Okay, so this MassChallenge is like you and Akil started from ground zero to build this massive program. How did you decide it was time to do something new?
Yeah, so I think it became pretty large, right? So we had these 9 programs around the world in 7 cities and 4 countries, like 80 plus employees, I forget, 85, 90 employees at its peak maybe. And so the CEO role became more and more like an operating CEO, which isn't my strength. Like I'm not the structured discipline operator. My strength is the vision, the creation, the rallying the troops around a mission, and getting 5 people to act like they're 50 or 10 people to act like they're 100, but organizing the structure and discipline and having an HR department and consistent, it's just not the thing that I love, and it's also not what I'm really good at. So over time I started to kind of get a little more bored, and I started to also feel like I don't think I'm the best at doing this anymore, and somebody else will be better. So on top of that, it's a nonprofit, so my upside is capped, and I still have student loans today. So and my wife was like, "Hey, how come we're still flying coach? You went to business school. I thought we were going to solve that problem, and we were going to be rich now, and we need another car. And how come So I was like, all right, I'm feeling some pressure to make some money, and so then I was like, all right, I my first idea was to create a fund and align it with MassChallenge. Like it would be a fund that would invest in the winners. And I really struggled to find the right structure that would be optimized for MassChallenge interests, for my interests, and would be able to raise the fund and the right size and all that stuff. And so I struggled with that. I tried that for a while. And then I just decided, you know what? I just got to spin out separately and launch my own fund. And I will naturally invest in a lot of MassChallenge alumni and startups or the broader community. And so that's what I did. So then I just spun out. We promoted up the COO into the CEO role together with the board. And then I launched Two Lanterns Venture Capital as a fund. First target was $20 million as a seed fund doing software investments. And we ended up getting oversubscribed to 25 million. And we just completed the investment cycle of that fund. and just launched Fund 2. And we will probably make our first investment out of Fund 2 this month. We just called Capital, so we're up and running.
That's awesome. So it's the same size fund for Fund 2?
Similar. We'll target a little bit bigger, 30 to 40. We held a first close, so we're not like at just under 10. So we're on the pathway there, but not all the way there. And it's been an interesting and challenging fundraising climate for the past couple of years. I think that will improve significantly this year, again, especially with exits, which will improve sort of everybody's liquidity. So I think that will help. But we have enough to exist and invest, and we're already on our way to doing so.
Well, the fundraising process versus the first time you trying to raise the $50 million fund for MassChallenge must have been a lot different. One, you have a very expansive network, right?
Yeah.
But two, you actually proved that you knew something about what you were aiming to do.
I have a massive network. And then my partner in the fund is Israeli. I know her from business school. She's got an amazing, I would argue, one of the top 5 or 10 networks in all of Israel. She's amazingly well connected, especially to early stage startups there. Her whole family is in the startup ecosystem, investors, founders, et cetera. And so her whole background, she's run accelerators. She came through the 8200 intelligence unit. So we have we just have outstanding deal flow. And then we have this broad network of smart people in the startup ecosystem that can help us to validate deal flow. Like, is this really a good idea? Is this a technology? We can contact CXOs at large enterprises to say, would you pay for this? How much would you pay for this? And we can help our startups to get customers. The customers can help validate technologies for us. So it gives us a lot of advantages. And again, I remain very bullish on Massachusetts. We invest all over the US. We have investments in DC and California and Florida, and in Massachusetts and New York as well. And then also a lot in Israel is our other major area of concentration.
So what's on your radar these days in terms of technology, industry?
So we're industry agnostic and it's software only, otherwise industry agnostic, US and Israel. Fund 2 is 50% target of Israel startup, Israeli founders, 50% non-Israeli, so US really. Otherwise, we're industry agnostic. That said, there's certain industries we don't like as much and some industries that we like and expect to have a concentration in. AI is obviously, a massive opportunity right now. We're less excited or chasing sort of the foundational models, which are incredibly expensive and already mostly well established. But there's huge opportunities for data. Like, data is the new oil. So anybody with proprietary data sets or a really proprietary methodology for aggregating valuable data into a usable format, that's very interesting. AI oriented around specific verticals. Healthcare is a great one, but we have investment in shipping industry. It could be really, and a lot of them are overlooked industries that are large industries and could benefit from even relatively simple improvements in technology. So I like any AI applied to any sort of vertical market that is not quite as competitive, but is large, are great opportunities. I think defense has, unfortunately, but has a strong future over the next 5 to 10 years. We see a lot of global conflict and a need to reinvest in new technologies in defense, safety, security, cybersecurity included in that. I think healthcare has amazing opportunities. We're software only, but there's a lot of software related, health tech innovations as well. So those are among our primary areas of concentrated focus, I guess, but we're open to anything. We want the entrepreneur to amaze us with their idea, their vision for the future. And if it's compelling, we'll invest in any industry.
Like, what's your process? Like, what's the best way for a founder to hopefully get a first meeting from you? And what do you expect out of that first meeting?
Yeah, we're very easy to reach. We're all just first name at 2l.vc. And so the best way to reach us, though, I would say this, is definitely through a warm introduction. And it's kind of just like the first basic test of an entrepreneur. I get 5 probably cold emails a day, and I just delete them. I don't even. I used to reply, but it's overwhelming. I can't keep up even with replying, so I just delete them. You have to come to me through somebody that I know, maybe one of my investors. I know so many people. I have 10,000 plus contacts on LinkedIn. Just go and find somebody that we know in common. Reach out to them and have them contact me. Say, hey, I know this person from business school, or I worked with them. They're super solid. I really respect them. They asked me to connect you. then I will automatically take that first meeting from a perspective of respect and knowledge and some kind of context and background. So you always want to get a warm intro. That's like rule number one with all VCs, not just us, but all VCs. And then I think ideally, reach out before you're desperate, right? You don't want to, if you're like, I need money desperately by Friday, that's not a good, formula for, we want to build long-term relationships. The best thing you can tell an early stage investor, I think, is we're not actually fundraising. I just want to get your input on my idea. Those are like the sexiest words to an investor. What do you mean you're not fundraising? But I have money to invest. I thought that's what we're doing here. That means you don't even need me. And then you get more intrigued. You're like, well, I would have find out more about this. This is interesting. But that's the best, is reach out well before you need the money and then stay in touch. Keep updating them on your metrics. Are you hitting your numbers? Are you getting there? And then when you're ready to raise money, they already know everything they need to know. And then you can raise money by Friday because you've already sort of set the stage. So, reaching out in advance, and just like making mutual friends with our friends and contacts, that's all super helpful stuff.
And what finally gets you over the hump of investing into a company?
Yeah, by far and away, the number one thing that's most important is the strength of the team. And that is a vague thing, and it can exhibit itself in different ways. So that's partially intentionally vague. But I would say in particular, integrity is very important for early stage investors, because we're going to be together for 10 years. And it will be possible to screw over early investors at many points along that path. So we need to know that there's some kind of loyalty and honesty and integrity, and that you're not lying about your financials or your team or other things, that there's like a trust that we can have, really. That's a very big element. Ambition is obviously of real relevance. We want to see people that want to win. It can't be like, oh, I'd like to sort of do something, but I'm not really sure, and maybe I'll just do it on the weekends and kind of, no, it's got to be like, you got to be really committed and firmly driven by your own vision, like really amazed by it. Like you can't not do this. You're so excited about it. So that ambition and passion, it's great to have obviously technical skill and capability, but it's a little bit less important, honestly. Most of that you can hire or pick up. So we do look to see a good team structure, that you've got like a complementary skills on the team, but a lot of that stuff you can build over time. So it's mostly about the team. That is like 65 to 75% of what we look at is, do we believe this team is driven, capable to win? Are they like really devoted? Because the idea itself is going to pivot. You're going to pivot a bunch of times. Your business plan is wrong in a lot of ways. So you're going to pivot. So you can't pay too much attention to that stuff. We just want to know you're smart enough, you listen well enough, you're driven enough that you're going to figure out when you need to pivot and make those pivots along the way. So it's most about the team. Then the market needs to be large enough to satisfy venture scale, right? It can't be that you're targeting a local neighborhood bakery, because it's just, you're never going to scale big enough. It's never going to return. You have to have a viable path to get to 100 million plus of revenue and have $1 billion exit. Obviously not everybody's going to get there, but it has to be a possibility within the industry. And that also means that the industry dynamics are favorable enough. That it's not hyper competitive. Like, of course, foundational Gen AI models are a huge market, but it's unlikely you can start now and beat ChatGPT and all of the others that are already at play here. And the billions of dollars that needs to be spent for you to catch up, it's not a game that we can play. We're not that big of, so the competitive dynamics, the timing, all of that stuff comes into play to an extent with market. That's probably another sort of 15 to 20%. And then the remainder is like, what kind of traction have you generated? Do you have a product? Does it make sense? Does it look sound? Are you generating revenue already? Do you have interest from customers? All of that stuff. And that's, shifts more towards team at the pre-seed even. And then at the seed level, you expect to see a little bit more traction, a better understanding of the market. At Series A, you would expect to see even more metrics, and Series B and beyond, it becomes almost a formula, like just based on your, CAC and LTV and churn rates and other stuff. It's less about the team.
Well, through MassChallenge, you obviously saw a bunch of companies go through the program. Obviously, you weren't like involved with every company, but from a macro level, like, what are the most common mistakes that you see entrepreneurs make?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think people underestimate how difficult it is. It is really, if you are trying to launch something new, you have to overturn an entire industry's behavior. And like not just one or two people, but thousands of people have to change their behavior to adopt your proposed model, especially if it's a really big idea. And you're going to encounter along the way financing risk, team risk, technology risk, market risk, other entrants, competitors. Like there are 1,000 ways that you can die almost every day. And there's only really one or two narrow pathways that get to success. So the probability is really low that you're going to have a huge success. And I think the important, so I do want people to launch startups. I'm not saying be deterred. I'm just saying you shouldn't launch a startup because your primary goal is to get rich. It's not, it's like the expected value is negative. You're probably going to lose money and upset your family and friends and stress out a lot of people. So the reason to launch a company is because you can't not do it, because you love the idea and the opportunity so much that it's just too important for you. And you don't know anything else that you could possibly do that would be as exciting. And if you love it that much and you're that excited about it, then you have a chance to pull it off. But if you don't, you will quit because it's super hard. So you better love it really a lot from the beginning, or else you will quit in like months and you'll waste everybody's time. So I think that's the most important thing to realize. It is incredibly difficult. That means only do it if you really love it. It also means don't be too hard on yourself. The path is full of failure. It's mostly failure. It's mostly failure and suffering for at least the first 18 months. And even I think beyond that. But so get used to it. You got to be resilient. You got to get up every day and know I'm going to mostly swing and get strikes, but I'm holding out for that one hit. I'm going to get there, and you keep refining and getting better. So I think it's resilience is kind of the outcome that you have to be prepared for. Do something that you love and be prepared to suffer enormously and be resilient and power through, or do something else.
All right, 3 apps you can't live without.
Mine are kind of boring, honestly. Like I love Outlook. I literally I live in Outlook. I'm a big email fiend. And I use my inbox as an inbox. It's my task list. It's how I structure my day, my calendar, everything. I really literally can't live without it. I don't know what I'm doing next. I got to look at my calendar. It's like my plan for everything. So Outlook, I'm always got music running. So Spotify or Sonos, depending on where I'm at. But so Spotify probably is one that's just super key. And I'm so happy that we figured out how to stream music thoughtfully and at a reasonable price. It's like a game changer for me and for my life. What else? Maybe I really like, I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks recently, or Reddit. I'm on Reddit a lot. It's probably by usage, it's Reddit. But I'm not sure I'm proudest of that because it's not necessarily good for me, but it is how I kind of distract myself with it and get a little bit of peace and quiet. I do find it calming and soothing just to browse through. So probably it's Reddit, but I don't know. Otherwise, audiobooks and ways, there's a lot. I mean, I'm pretty dependent on technology to just get through my regular day.
All right, how about a good book or podcast for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I'll give you one first that I just think is a great book that everybody should read. So I think Yuval Noah Harari is an amazing storyteller. All of his books are incredible. He had *Sapiens* was the first one that I read. First one I think that made him famous is amazing, and everybody should read that. But I just finished his more recent book, *Nexus*, and it is outstanding, and it is relevant to entrepreneurs because it's a look at information systems throughout history, culminating in the period of AI. And so it's more macro. It's not going to teach you how to run a startup per se, but it does cover a lot of what are the actual trends that are taking place and how should we think about those trends and try to steer technology as responsible human beings, trying to shepherd the planet and society into a good place. And I think he does a much better job of outlining what the actual risks are and what the actual opportunities are, without being sort of sky is falling, fear-mongering, or super optimistic, tech bro, everything is going to be perfect. He finds a really thoughtful, intellectually sound narrative for what it means for us. I think it's very well done. So that is a book I just recommend in general. For entrepreneurship books, so Bill Ollett would kill me if I didn't mention his book, Disciplined Entrepreneurship. And it is a great book. I can even hear 24 Steps to a Successful Startup by Bill Ollett. He's amazing. It is great. It is practical and really worth reading. And then I also really liked The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I thought that was like a good, interesting read. And I think it gives a pretty unvarnished look at what it means to be an entrepreneur. It is really freaking hard. Like it's not a vacation. There should be no entrepreneurial tourists. It's terrible. You're going to probably ruin your life. Right? You have to really want it really badly to, like being good at anything. Like if you want to be in the NBA, you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to play basketball on the weekends. You're just not going to get there. It's not going to be, this is something you got to do all day, every day. You got to love it. You got to live it. And so I think he does a pretty good job of describing that world and then giving some useful tips along the way as well.
Well, a proud moment for me at VentureFizz. So I got an email from Paul Cheek at MIT. It was, I don't know, a year ago. And he's like, I'm publishing the next version of Disciplined Entrepreneurship, and VentureFizz is recommended as one of the tools in there. And I'm like, what? Like, that's amazing. I'm enshrined in a book that's, affiliated with MIT. So
awesome.
I was super proud of that. So, all right, outside of work, what do you like to do?
I really like to do stuff with my hands. Honestly, I like yard work is very meditative and calming for me. Like taking care of the lawn. We have I live in Newton primarily, and I have a tiny little postage stamp lawn. So here it's not really viable for me, but we have a house up in Maine, and there I have a little bit of a larger lawn, and it's beautiful nature. And I love just taking care of the birds and doing the lawn. It sounds very mundane, but I really find a great peace and calm in it is really something for me. And doing household repairs. I'm a mediocre woodworker, and so making stuff out of wood or just repairing stuff challenges that part of my brain. I like creating things with my hands. And I don't get to do that every day with entrepreneurship. There's obviously results to your activity, but it's not that kind of manual labor. It's more intellectual. So I really like getting that outlet to do stuff with my hands. It's great.
Very cool. Well, John, thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through your background story. Obviously, all the great work that you and Akil and the whole MassChallenge team accomplished with building that juggernaut, and obviously what you're doing with Two Lanterns.
Well, thank you for everything you've done with VentureFizz. I feel like we've been there lockstep for a very long time. And you've done amazing work, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. So thank you for that.